The Terran Integration Military Academy on Kepler Station represented the finest achievement in galactic cooperation, assuming one defined cooperation as allowing primitive species to participate in activities they were fundamentally unqualified for. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, 12 kilometers of gleaming corridors, anti-grav training facilities, and enough bureaucratic offices to house the ego of every mid-level administrator in 3 spiral arms. The Academy's promotional materials, translated into roughly 4,000 languages, and twice as many interpretations of what constitute acceptable military behavior, proudly proclaimed its mission to forge unity through diversity in the pursuit of galactic security. What this actually meant in practical terms was that various species could gather in one place to confirm their pre-existing prejudices about everyone else, while filling out forms in triplicate. The Valkyrian Commandant, a creature whose ancestors had perfected warfare sometime around humanity's first successful use of fire, reviewed the latest batch of integration reports with the enthusiasm typically reserved for tax audits. His species stood an impressive 3 meters tall, possessed natural armor plating that could deflect small arms fire, and had evolved specialized combat organs that humans would generously classify as unfair advantages. Naturally, this made them ideal candidates for evaluating the military potential of species who had only recently figured out interstellar travel. The Catherian tactical instructors, beings whose culture had elevated strategic thinking to an art form roughly equivalent to human poetry, maintained detailed psychological profiles on each species' cognitive limitation. Their 6-armed physiology allowed them to process multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously, while their enhanced neural architecture could calculate probability matrices that would give human computers nervous breakdowns. They approached military education with the patient condescension of professors teaching arithmetic to particularly slow kindergarteners. Then there were the Borvac heavy assault specialists, whose idea of subtle warfare involved only partially leveling city blocks. Their exoskeleton structures could withstand direct hits from weapons that would vaporize most organic matter, and their natural regenerative capabilities meant that injuries requiring months of recovery for other species barely qualified as inconveniences. They viewed military training as a delightful recreational activity, roughly equivalent to human flower arranging in terms of physical exertion required. Into this ecosystem of natural-born warriors and tactical geniuses stepped the latest addition to Squad 47, a human female who looked like she might have trouble opening a particularly stubborn jar of pickles, let alone surviving combat against enemies who treated plasma rifles as recreational equipment. She stood barely 1.6 meters tall, possessed the kind of skeletal structure that suggested her species had never seriously considered the possibility of physical violence, and weighed approximately the same as a Valkyrian combat. Her medical evaluation indicated standard human limitations: no natural armor, no enhanced sensory organs, no specialized combat adaptations, and a disturbing tendency towards something the psychological profiles labeled as improvisation, which everyone understood to be a polite way of describing panic-induced decision-making. The processing officer, a Catherian administrator whose mathematical precision extended to predicting failure rates with depressing accuracy, completed the standard integration assessment with mechanical efficiency. Standard atmospheric requirements, standard nutritional needs, standard psychological profile indicating the usual human mixture of optimism and ignorance. Her test scores fell within expected parameters for her species, which meant she demonstrated basic competency in subjects that 12-year-olds from most civilized worlds mastered before breakfast. The dormitory assignments reflected the Academy's commitment to species integration, which meant forcing incompatible life forms to share living spaces in the name of character building. The human found herself bunked with a Valkyrian whose armor plating scraped against the walls and a Borvac whose nighttime regeneration cycle produced sounds that suggested mechanical equipment undergoing catastrophic failure. Her squadmates greeted her arrival with the polite indifference typically reserved for harmless curiosity. The Catherian tactical specialist calculated her probable survival duration in actual combat at approximately 4 minutes, assuming optimal conditions and enemy forces experiencing simultaneous equipment failure. The Valkyrian assault trooper expressed his opinion through a series of clicks that roughly translated to adorable but doom. The Borvac demolitions expert simply patted her on the head with enough force to require a trip to the medical bay, which everyone agreed demonstrated remarkable restraint on his part. The orientation briefing covered standard academy policies, including the particularly relevant section on posthumous commendation procedures and the surprisingly comprehensive guidelines for notifying next of kin across interstellar distances. The human listened with the attentive expression that her instructors had learned to associate with either deep concentration or complete bewilderment, both equally probable given her species' documented cognitive limitation. As the first day concluded, the Academy's sophisticated monitoring systems recorded another successful integration, filed the appropriate reports, and calculated insurance premiums for the latest batch of recruits. The human retired to her dormitory with the serene confidence that typically preceded spectacular disasters, while her instructors began the traditional betting pools regarding her probable cause of death. The Academy's training regimen had been carefully designed by committees of experts, who understood that the best way to prepare warriors for combat was to subject them to increasingly elaborate forms of ritualized suffering. The morning physical assessment began at what humans optimistically called dawn, though Kepler Station's artificial day-night cycle bore roughly the same relationship to natural circadian rhythms as military food bore to actual nutrition. The obstacle course represented the pinnacle of interspecies engineering, featuring challenges that tested every conceivable combat-relevant ability, while simultaneously providing entertainment for instructors with nothing better to do than watch recruits fail spectacularly. The Valkyrian traversed the electrified barrier walls by simply walking through them, their natural armor treating high-voltage electricity as a mild tingling sensation. The Catherian navigated the maze sections by calculating optimal paths in real time, their enhanced cognitive processing turning complex navigation puzzles into trivial exercise. The Borvac approached obstacles with the subtle strategy of destroying anything that looked inconvenient, leaving behind a trail of structural debris that maintenance crews had learned to expect. The human meanwhile demonstrated her species' remarkable talent for finding entirely novel ways to disappoint expectation. She couldn't punch through reinforced barriers, couldn't calculate trajectory vectors in her head, and showed a disturbing tendency to examine obstacles as if they were puzzles requiring creative solutions rather than challenges demanding superior physical capability. Her completion time for the course fell somewhere between embarrassing and please report to medical for fitness evaluation. Weapons training provided additional opportunities for interspecies comparison and human inadequacy. The standard issue plasma rifle weighed approximately 40% of the human's total body mass and delivered a recoil that sent her sliding backward across the training deck with each shot. Her accuracy scores suggested that enemy forces could improve their survival odds by standing directly in front of her, while her reload times indicated that hostiles would have sufficient opportunity to complete advanced degrees between her firing attempts. The Valkyrian instructor, whose species had been perfecting marksmanship for longer than human civilization had existed, offered helpful suggestions like try not falling over, and perhaps consider aiming at targets rather than sealing fixtures. His patience with human limitations reflected the kind of professional dedication typically associated with saints or individuals with significant psychological disorders. Hand-to-hand combat training revealed the depths of human physical inadequacy with scientific precision. The Borvac sparring partner approached these sessions with the gentle consideration of someone playing catch with a particularly fragile child, yet still managed to send the human flying across the training mat with casual backhand gesture. The medical bay developed a reserved bed specifically for post-sparring recovery, complete with automated systems that had learned to recognize concussion symptoms in human physiology. The mess hall served as the Academy's primary venue for social stratification and species-based hierarchical reinforcement. Meals were consumed in clearly defined sections that corresponded to evolutionary advantages, with apex predators occupying the central tables while herbivorous species clustered near the exits in case rapid evacuation became necessary. The human found herself relegated to a corner table typically reserved for species whose primary survival strategy involved hiding behind larger, more competent life forms. Conversations during mealtimes followed predictable patterns of mutual species validation and gentle mockery of obvious inferiors. The Catherians discussed tactical theories that referenced mathematical concepts requiring additional dimensions to properly visualize. The Valkyrians compared battle scars and debated the relative merits of various armor-piercing ammunition types. The Borvacs engaged in contests involving the casual destruction of dining implements while discussing demolitions techniques that could level small moons. The human contributed to these conversations by listening with the attentive expression of someone trying to follow discussions conducted in languages she didn't speak about subjects she couldn't comprehend. Her occasional questions revealed the kind of fundamental misunderstanding that suggested her species approached warfare with the same conceptual framework they used for recreational activities. Dormitory life provided additional opportunities for cultural exchange and human humiliation. The Valkyrian roommate's sleep cycle involved periodic armor adjustments that produced sounds resembling construction equipment, while the Borvac's regenerative processes created aromatic experiences that challenged even the station's advanced atmospheric processing systems. The human adapted to these conditions with the resilient optimism that her species mistook for courage, but everyone else recognized as evidence of cognitive limitation. Evening study sessions covered tactical doctrine, weapons systems and strategic planning using educational materials designed for species whose intellectual capabilities exceeded human standards by several orders of magnitude. The human approached these subjects with the determined concentration of someone trying to understand quantum physics using finger puppets, taking extensive notes that demonstrated her complete failure to grasp even basic concepts. Her squad mates observed these efforts with the kind of bemused affection typically reserved for particularly determined pets attempting to master complex tricks. The Catherian tactical specialist calculated the probability of the human successfully implementing standard battle doctrine at approximately 0.003%, assuming ideal conditions and enemy forces suffering from collective amnesia. As the second week concluded, the Academy's evaluation systems recorded standard progress indicators for most species, while flagging human performance metrics that fell below previously established minimums for sentient military personnel. The betting pools regarding her survival had evolved into more sophisticated wagering systems involving specific cause of death, duration of consciousness, and probable collateral damage to surrounding friendly forces. The Academy's curriculum included practical field exercises designed to simulate real combat conditions, assuming one defined real combat as carefully controlled scenarios with predetermined outcomes and conveniently located medical facilities. Squad 47 received assignment to Operation Educational Experience, a routine patrol mission through the neutral zone that promised all the excitement of a particularly vigorous nature walk combined with the educational value of confirming everyone's pre-existing assumptions about their combat capability. The mission briefing, conducted by an instructor whose species had evolved past the need for actual combat experience, outlined objectives that included reconnaissance data collection and the ever-popular return alarm. The target zone contained no known hostile forces, no significant strategic value, and approximately the same threat level as a moderately aggressive municipal park. Perfect conditions for allowing inexperienced recruits to practice walking in formation without accidentally shooting each other. The transport vessel represented the finest in educational safety equipment, featuring enough armor plating to withstand direct hits from small asteroids and sufficient firepower to level medium-sized cities. Its pilot, a veteran whose service record included sleeping through 3 separate galactic conflicts, approached the mission with the professional enthusiasm of someone conducting a routine taxi service to mildly dangerous neighborhoods. Squad 47's deployment followed standard tactical doctrine, which meant the Valkyrian took point position using his natural armor and enhanced sensory capabilities. The Catherian established overwatch with tactical analysis protocols. The Borvac handled heavy equipment with his usual subtle approach to problem solving, and the human carried backup supplies while trying not to trip over her own equipment. The patrol proceeded according to plan for approximately 14 minutes, which established a new Academy record for the duration between mission commencement and catastrophic failure of all underlying assumptions. The first indication of deviation from expected parameters came when the Catherian's enhanced sensors detected energy signatures that weren't supposed to exist in theoretically uninhabited space. The second indication arrived in the form of hostile weapons fire that transformed the peaceful educational experience into the kind of learning opportunity that typically resulted in posthumous academic credit. The attacking force consisted of raiders, whose approach to interstellar piracy involved the time-honored strategy of shooting first and asking questions later, assuming they bothered with questions at all. The Valkyrians' combat instincts, honed by millennia of evolutionary pressure and extensive training,
prompted him to take defensive positions behind cover that provided optimal protection from incoming fire. The Catherians' tactical processing capability immediately began calculating probability matrices for survival, while requesting updated intelligence data that wasn't currently available. The Borvak's response involved enthusiastic application of explosive ordnance in the general direction of anything that looked hostile, which included most of the surrounding landscape. The human, meanwhile, demonstrated her species' remarkable talent for approaching crisis situations with methods that bore no resemblance to anything covered in tactical manual. While her squadmates engaged in professionally appropriate combat responses, she began examining the attackers' firing patterns with the focused attention of someone solving an interesting puzzle, rather than someone facing imminent death. The raiders' assault strategy relied on superior firepower, numerical advantage, and the element of surprise, all of which had proven effective against standard military responses throughout galactic history. Their weapons systems represented state-of-the-art technology designed to overwhelm conventional defensive measures, while their tactical coordination suggested professional training and extensive combat experience. Unfortunately for the raiders, their tactical planning hadn't accounted for the possibility of encountering opponents whose approach to warfare resembled performance art more than military doctrine. The humans' analysis of their attack patterns revealed timing inconsistencies that suggested automated targeting systems, while their formation structure indicated centralized command coordination that created exploitable vulnerability. Her observation that the raiders consistently adjusted their positions in response to return fire prompted an entirely unconventional strategy that involved deliberately missing shots in specific patterns to manipulate enemy movement. The Catherians' combat algorithms, designed to optimize accuracy and minimize ammunition waste, initially interpreted this approach as evidence of stress-induced cognitive breakdown. The turning point arrived when the humans suggested that instead of engaging the raiders directly, Squad 47 should relocate to a position that would force the attackers to expose their command vessel, while pursuing. This strategy violated several fundamental principles of tactical doctrine, including the generally accepted wisdom that retreating towards superior enemy forces represented poor survival planning. The Valkyrians' combat experience suggested that following tactical advice from someone whose marksmanship scores resembled abstract art qualified as advanced suicide planning. The Borvak's approach to complex strategic thinking typically involved determining which direction to point explosive devices, making him an unlikely candidate for evaluating unconventional tactical theory. The Catherians' analytical capabilities, however, began processing the human's suggestions with the kind of mathematical precision that revealed uncomfortable truths about established doctrine. The squad's implementation of the human strategy produced results that defied conventional military wisdom, while simultaneously proving disturbingly effective. The raiders' pursuit patterns, optimized for engaging retreating forces, placed their command structure in exposed positions that created targeting opportunities for the Borvak's heavy weapons system. Their automated defensive systems, programmed to respond to standard attack vectors, proved inadequate against unconventional approaches that resembled tactical doctrine designed by committee members experiencing simultaneous nervous breakdown. The mission's conclusion featured the kind of spectacular success that typically resulted in extensive debriefing sessions and uncomfortable questions about existing training protocol. Squad 47 returned to base with complete mission objectives, achieved 0 casualties, and 1 captured enemy vessel containing intelligence data that shouldn't have been obtainable through routine patrol operation. The humans' after-action report, filed using standard military formats that hadn't been designed to accommodate descriptions of improvised tactical solutions, created administrative confusion that rippled through the Academy's evaluation system. Her squadmates found themselves in the unprecedented position of recommending commendations for someone whose previous military assessments had suggested unsuitability for combat roles, requiring basic competence. The Academy's response to Squad 47's unexpected success followed established protocols for dealing with anomalous results, which involved conducting additional testing to confirm that initial data hadn't been corrupted by equipment malfunctions or clerical error. The possibility that human tactical thinking might possess merit beyond comic relief required investigation using properly controlled conditions and witnesses, whose testimonies couldn't be dismissed as stress-induced hallucination. The advanced combat simulation represented the Academy's most sophisticated training environment, featuring holographic opponents programmed with tactical algorithms derived from actual enemy forces encountered throughout galactic military history. The scenario parameters included numerical disadvantages, equipment limitations, and environmental hazards designed to test command decision-making under conditions that typically resulted in educational casualties and valuable learning experiences about proper funeral arrangements. Squad 47 entered the simulation chamber with revised dynamics that reflected their recent field experience. Though the betting pools had simply evolved into more complex wagering systems, involving the specific methods by which traditional military hierarchy would reassert itself. The Valkyrian maintained his designated point position, the Catherian established tactical overwatch, and the Borvac prepared his explosive solutions to anticipated problems. The human, however, no longer occupied her previous role as ambulatory supply storage, with questionable survival prospects. Her squadmates had begun the disturbing practice of actually listening, when she offered observations about enemy behavior patterns, tactical vulnerabilities, and strategic opportunities that somehow escaped detection by sophisticated analytical systems designed specifically for such purpose. The simulation commenced with hostile forces implementing textbook assault patterns that had proven effective against conventional military responses throughout recorded galactic conflict. Their numerical superiority, advanced weaponry, and coordinated tactical movements represented the kind of overwhelming force that typically concluded educational exercises with lessons about the importance of following proper chain of command protocols during surrender negotiations. The Valkyrian's initial response followed standard combat doctrine, seeking defensive positions that maximized his natural advantages while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. The Catherian's tactical analysis identified optimal engagement vectors and calculated probability matrices for various defensive strategies. The Borvac's contribution involved enthusiastic application of destructive ordnance toward anything that appeared to require elimination. These professionally appropriate responses produced predictably inadequate results against opponents whose tactical programming had been specifically designed to counter conventional military doctrine. The squad's defensive positions became increasingly untenable as enemy forces implemented flanking maneuvers, suppression tactics, and coordinated assaults that exploited standard operational procedures. The moment of tactical transition occurred when the Valkyrian, facing imminent simulated death, turned to the human with the kind of desperate attention typically reserved for religious conversion experience. His request for tactical advice represented a philosophical breakthrough that challenged several millennia of species-based, hierarchical assumptions about military competency and leadership qualification. The human's assessment of the tactical situation revealed patterns that sophisticated analytical systems had overlooked, vulnerabilities that advanced combat algorithms had failed to identify, and opportunities that conventional military wisdom suggested didn't exist. Her recommendations involved coordinated movements that resembled organized chaos more than established doctrine, timing sequences that defied mathematical optimization, and strategic objectives that appeared to ignore fundamental principles of battlefield geometry. The squad's implementation of her tactical guidance produced results that violated everything their instructors had taught them about proper military procedure, while simultaneously proving devastatingly effective against opponents programmed to counter conventional response. The Valkyrian found himself advancing through enemy fire using movement patterns that felt fundamentally wrong, yet somehow avoided incoming rounds with improbable consistency. The Catherian's analytical capability, overwhelmed by tactical variables that exceeded his species' computational frameworks, began deferring to human intuitive decision-making, with the reluctant acceptance of someone discovering that poetry might be more effective than mathematics for solving engineering problems. His sophisticated targeting systems achieved unprecedented accuracy when following firing solutions that the humans suggested based on observations that shouldn't have constituted valid tactical intelligence. The Borvac's explosive enthusiasm, channeled through human strategic planning, transformed from indiscriminate destruction into precisely coordinated demolitions that eliminated enemy defensive positions, while creating tactical advantages that conventional engineering approaches couldn't achieve. His natural inclination toward excessive firepower became a strategic asset when directed by someone whose approach to battlefield management resembled three-dimensional chess played by participants experiencing collective epiphany. The simulation's climactic sequence featured Squad 47 executing a coordinated assault that defied every principle of tactical doctrine, while achieving objectives that should have required forces 3 times their size, with significantly superior equipment. The humans' battlefield coordination involved directing species with natural combat advantages, using strategic concepts that their enhanced analytical capabilities couldn't have developed independently. The final moments of engagement showcased the complete reversal of traditional military hierarchy as genetically superior warriors followed tactical guidance from someone whose physical capabilities suggested unsuitability for combat roles, requiring basic survival skills. The Valkyrian advanced on her signals, the Catherian fired on her target designations, and a Borvac demolished obstacles according to her strategic priority. The simulation concluded with enemy forces eliminated, objectives secured, and casualty reports indicating 0 friendly losses, despite facing overwhelming numerical and technological distance. The aftermath featured the unprecedented spectacle of alien military instructors attempting to analyze tactical recordings that documented success achieved through methods that shouldn't have worked according to established strategic principles. Squad 47 emerged from the simulation chamber with fundamentally altered group dynamics and a shared understanding that human military thinking operated according to principles that transcended conventional tactical education. The Academy's evaluation systems struggled to process performance metrics that exceeded maximum established parameters, while simultaneously violating minimum competency requirements. The betting pools, meanwhile, quietly dissolved as their fundamental premise had been invalidated by empirical evidence that suggested human military potential might extend beyond providing comic relief and cautionary examples. The various alien species found themselves confronting the uncomfortable possibility that their assumptions about evolutionary superiority might require minor adjustments to accommodate the reality of human tactical effectiveness. The human, for her part, continued displaying the same unremarkable physical capabilities and unimpressive technical specifications that had initially marked her as obviously unsuited for military service. The only difference was that now, when she suggested tactical modifications or strategic alternatives, her squad mates listened with the attentive respect typically reserved for individuals whose advice tended to result in continued survival rather than educational fatality. The Academy's administrative systems eventually processed the necessary paperwork to acknowledge that sometimes the least impressive recruits produced the most impressive results, though they filed these conclusions under exceptions rather than revisions to established doctrine. After all, changing fundamental assumptions about military hierarchy would require forms that nobody had designed yet,